All right, if you didn't notice it already, I gave you back your graded test. All right, if you don't understand why I did something, feel free to ask during the break. If you disagree with what I did and you want to fight me on it, feel free to do that. I'd prefer that after class, but whenever you want, or email me or whenever. Now remember, Friday, you've got this material here due. All right? The good news is, if you wanted it, you now have the sports store project done through Chapter 9. All right? But go back in and check and make sure that for the Chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, under the written test which is there, make sure you have a grade. All right? If you don't, all right, and you say, well, I don't have that, then email me or come see me on that. All right? Because anything that I have that's on this list here that I don't have in there by Friday, I'm just putting in, I'm going to click the X, which means you get a 0. All right? It's not that I'm trying to be a jerk. I don't want to fall too far behind on grading. All right? We had nothing from Chapter 5, nothing from Chapter 6. Remember, though, for Chapter 6, there was the thing in there on unit testing. All right? And if you've done any work with unit testing, turn that in, please, even if it's not the one that you were given the other day. We also did the Contoso code first, which we basically did pretty much as it was, and we did the Contoso database first, and I asked you to make some modifications on that. All right? What I'm looking at doing right now is tomorrow we're going to start talking more databases. Friday, I'm going to make one last lab day so people catch up. All right? And don't write this down. I'm not even going to hold myself to this, but as of now, this is kind of what I foresee as the rest of the semester. Like I said, don't write it down because it could change. All right? We're going over chapters 9 and 10 this week. Tomorrow we'll talk entity framework, we'll talk link, and we'll talk lambda. There's no way in one class period you'll become an expert on link and lambda. All right? But we're going to start going through them. It'll make more sense when we get to that point. So that's all I'll say about that. Next week, I've flipped it around, but the point is, what I plan on doing Monday and Tuesday is having us start to work on this project. I've got to write a bunch of requirements this weekend. I will do so. We will also next week go over Chapter 11, which is on administration for this sports store project, and Chapter 12, which is final touches and security. So that's what I plan on doing next week. Then the following week, Chapter 13 is actually a very short chapter, but I'm hoping we can all deploy this. All right, wherever it happens to go, to Azure, to App Harbor, or wherever. All right. Then notice the way that I got pretty much the rest of the semester set up. Okay, and what we'll do is I'll lecture, on 2 chapters per week, starting with Chapter 8, 14, 15, 16, 17, etc. Some of those chapters we'll spend more time on than others. Some of the chapters in this book, they're over my head. So maybe you'd get them, but I sure as hell don't. All right? But I'll go back and take a look at them. But some of the material that was discussed thus far in the book, the author will say, and I'll have more to say on that in Chapter 20. So I think we should go over all of this. What are you going to be assigned from there? Let's just hold off on that until we start going over the chapters. All right? The project, as you can see, I plan on giving it to you basically in 3 parts. All right? I'm going to have Part 1 ready for you on Monday. All right? Sometime while we're in the middle of Part 1, I'll come up with the requirements for Part 2. Sometime when you're in the middle of Part 2, I'll give you the requirements for Part 3. Does that make sense? All right? And you'll notice the last 2 weeks, I want you to have time to just clean up any work you have, work on your portfolio. What I would like to do, maybe not on the last day of class, but during the last week of class, if you're done with everything, I guarantee you 100%, you will not need next semester Visual Studio. If you want to uninstall it, maybe your machine's older, you don't have much memory, etc. That's your call. But what I would like us to do the last week of class is to install whatever the latest version of Android Studio is, so you're ready to start on the first day come the spring semester. Does that make sense? All right. And we'll like I said, hopefully we'll do that. If there's time, maybe we'll even write a little Java program or something just to show it to you. So like I said, that's pretty much what I have planned. But please make sure you get this stuff in by Friday. All right. And if you go out, where do I put it? If nothing else, I'll pass out those this jump drives. All right, let you put it on there. I don't really care. All right. I am going to go over Chapter 10 today because I said I wanted to finish 9 and 10. So Chapter 10 brings the mobile part to the sports store. All right. Starts on page 255. It's about 20 pages long. All right. I mentioned this to you the other day. You can read it yourselves. I'm not going to read it to you. But what the author says here, again, is the fact that Model View Controller is a server-side thing. What we're talking about with mobile is a client-side thing. So yeah, there are some things that you can add to your project to make them work better in a mobile environment, but it's not going to be perfect. All right? I'll always remember this. Browsers have gotten much better as far as how they render stuff between different browsers. But I remember it's got to be a good 10 or 15 years ago when I'd be teaching and I would have students go and they'd say, they'd raise their hand, I'd walk over there, and at the time it was mainly Firefox and IE. You didn't hear anything about Chrome, but it was Firefox and IE. So student would show me their assignment and they said, look at this. I said, it looks really good. And I say, yeah, that's it in the IE. They'd bring the same thing up in Firefox, and it would look terrible. It would look totally different, or vice versa. We don't really have that as much today. All right? It's easier to be responsive today than it was years ago. All right? Now, the author will talk in here about, I think it's called Browser Stack, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I have shown you this before, but I do want to just say it one more time, and that is, if I come out here, and I'm just going to go out, and you've seen this already, but if I go out to CNN.com as an example, and I hit the F12 key, all right, that brings my stuff up here. This is my Chrome Developer Tools. If you do that on yours, they could appear over here, or on top, or wherever. It doesn't matter. But the point is, when I want to start seeing how something is going to look on a device, the fastest way of doing it is to click this second thing over here that looks like a square and a square, and it says Toggle Device Toolbar. But when you click on that, that is going to show you how your device is going to look in different kinds of devices. So again, there's a Galaxy 5 360 by 640. There's a Pixel 2, 411 by 733. There's an iPad Pro, all right, etc. You get the idea. So the idea is this, not so much for the project we're working on now, not so much for the sports store, but this project that we'll start on next week, it's going to be worth a lot of points. And one of the things that I'm going to expect is that it's going to be responsive. All right, that it looks nice. I will literally see if I can bring it up in my phone. I'll try it on here. I'll try it on Browser Stack. There are browser emulators that are out there. I'll try it on all that stuff. Not to break it, but I want it to look good on everything. When we start working on this, we're all going to work on the same project. That said, these projects are going to look very, 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 very different from one another. All right, that's part of my job, my charge, is to make sure that indeed that happens. All right. So they try to put mobile into context here, and that's totally fine. But the author starts by saying, well, what do you do to try to make something work on mobile? All right? You may or may not remember this, but when we talked in the C# class, we talked a little bit in there about exception handling, try-catch blocks, etc. You're going to see them again next semester in Java as well. The point is, when we started talking about errors in programs, and I mentioned that one way to handle errors is what I call the ostrich method. In other words, stick your head in the ground and just hope nobody ever does anything wrong. That's kind of what the author is saying here. All right? And what he means is, okay, it may not look good on all devices, but maybe it'll look good on some devices. Let's just do nothing. And when you think about it, that's the easiest way of doing things. All right? So he shows an example here, and he says this is Sports Store in an iPad with no modifications. Now, you already notice a few things. This isn't all the way over to the side. And there's a few other things, where it could be fixed or prettied up. But the bottom line is it doesn't look terrible. It's viewable, or whatever you want to say, with doing nothing. But remember that when you work on an iPad, especially if you're working on an iPad or an iPad Pro and you've got it in landscape mode, that'll look probably as close to the way it would look on a desktop or a laptop as you can get. But once you start putting it onto a phone, it's definitely not going to look the same. All right, and again, I have shown you this before. I know that. But this is where we ended up yesterday. So again, I'll just bring it up, and let's look at a couple things in here. So right there it is. There's our main page, so to speak. And that's not great, but it's not terrible. All right? So now I can go and I can add something to the cart. Well, again, that's my fault, but you see where it starts looking not as good. It's cutting this off, etc. So when it gets to a certain point, it's not bad. Here you can't even see the remove button. So if I go to here, again, that doesn't actually look that bad. All right? That's doing nothing. But the author says that's probably, in the end, not what you're going to want to do. All right? It is not at all impossible that one or more of you, when you graduate, either A, doesn't get a job right away in the field, or B, decides they want to go to work for themselves. All right? I've had people who have left this program who have told me that. So what I want to do is I want to work on my own. All right? And the hardest thing about working on your own is, you got to build up clientele, right? Well, one way you can build up clientele and you can do what people want is to ask them what they want. And if somebody says to you, hey, I was looking at the website you're creating for me, and you've got it up here on a laptop like this, and they bring it up on their phone and it looks bad, and they're like, this is unacceptable. All right? If you signed a contract and you said you're going to make them happy, you better do what you can to make them happy. What many companies do today, all right, and the author doesn't believe this philosophy, the author of your book here, but what many companies do today is they do mobile first. It's much harder to get stuff to look nice on a small screen as opposed to on a large screen. So some places, they've already got a website out there. So they've already done the desktop. So they've done the desktop first. So what do they do for mobile? One of three things. Nothing, which is, again, probably the worst way of doing it. All right. They put in media queries and the like and try to have one site that handles everything. Or they make a brand new site. All right. Oftentimes it starts with M underscore, meaning it's the mobile site. Close that. All right. Again, the author says here, the screenshots that he took, he got from browserstack.com. And I'm not even going to lie to you here. This morning, for the first time ever, I went out to browserstack.com. And it says app and browser testing made easy. All right, get starting here. Okay? And what it is it's at least somewhat similar to what I just showed you with the emulators. There are many sites, many's a bad word. There are sites like this one out here, other sites. They literally will go back many versions of IE, many versions of Firefox, many versions of Chrome, Opera, etc. And they will let you see how your product will look even on an older browser. They're emulators to show you how something will look. All right? Now, the author says the other way that you can do this, too. What if you don't want to do any of these? All right? Well, if you don't want to do any of these and you want to build an application, then he says, well, why don't you build a native application? Guess what? This is a native app. This is what you do next semester. So the author says here a native app is a smartphone app that is coded in a specific programming language, such as Objective-C in iOS. Take my word for it, you would hate that language more than any other language that you've ever had combined. They have asterisks all over the place, and they're pointers to memory. That whole language is just point this to memory, point this to memory. I taught it for a semester. People said, my God, I just hate the living hell out of this language. All right?
The C or the
No, the Objective-C that's right there. So what happened was it was rewritten, and now there's a language called Swift that's much easier. All right? And it's gained a lot more acceptance than Objective-C. We'll be using Java for the Android operating system. Also, sometime during the semester, I don't know when, but sometime during the semester, I will also show you Kotlin. Kotlin is basically sort of Google's answer to Swift. And it's Java, but it allows you to do a lot of things that Java doesn't allow you to do. All right? All right. So, if you are going to do something, the author says, well, one thing you can do is responsive design. I'm not going to read any of this to you. I'm not going to say any of this to you because you already went through responsive design. Your projects are at least semi-responsive right now because you do have Bootstrap on here. That said, most of the time we just have all the Bootstrap defaults, which don't always look good on small devices. All right? So the author says what we want to do here, says the goal is to adjust the layout of the main part of the application so it's visible on an iPhone. All right? And again, this is kind of what it looked like right now. It's not terrible, but it sure could be better. You know, just even little things like this where the word water sports, part of it sticks out of the button, doesn't look good. It looks kind of crunched together the way it is. This is with doing nothing. All right? So the author says we're going to tackle this problem in sections, focusing on different aspects of the layout. The goal is to preserve all of the functionality, but present it in a different way. And that pretty much is the goal of responsive web design. To show everybody what you showed them previously, but show it to them in a format where they can look at it and it makes sense. And stuff isn't all splattered all over the screen. All right? Now, it says here, the MVC framework, again, isn't an active participant in responsive design because of what I told you yesterday. Because MVC is a server-side framework. What we're talking about now is client-side. I also want to mention one last thing before we go on and start going through these exercises here, and that is this. I want to make sure you've heard these terms. All right? This is definitely, if you're going in for a web-related job, you may be asked what this is, and what's the difference between the two. All right? It's a difference in mentality. You are not going to, I'm not giving you a written test on this. I just want you to hear it. All right? So, with graceful degradation, you degrade gracefully. Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. But what you do is you say, you give the user everything that you could possibly give them. But if they're looking at it using an older browser, it degrades gracefully. In other words, they're not going to be able to tell, if you have, for example, older versions of IE don't support border radius, they don't support like rounded buttons and stuff, they just won't show it. All right? So it won't look as nice on an older browser, but it won't break on an older browser. All right? Again, the idea is it degrades gracefully. So you start with everything. And then you just go through it and make sure that if people have older browsers, it doesn't break. With progressive enhancement, you start with bare bones and you build up. So somebody who's looking at it, God knows if anybody has this, but if somebody's looking on it at your website using IE4, it'll still have the basic functionality. All right? But there are some things that are in there that they won't be able to see. And a lot of it is HTML5 stuff and or CSS3 stuff. All right? So again, with graceful degradation, you start with the best and you work your way down. With progressive enhancement, you start with the worst or the base and you work your way up. All right? And I know, as an example, if I was going in and I was going to be interviewing you for a possible job in web, that I would ask you questions like that. And then if you showed me you knew what they meant, I'd say, fine. Now explain to me how you do that. All right? And again, that's the kind of thing, you can go out there and take a look online because they have like 50 popular questions for web interviews, etc. All right? All right. So the author says we're going to start with the page header, which may not look like much, but it says sports store, right? So again, I'm going to bring it up one last time. Run it one last time here. And I'm going to shrink it way down once it comes up here. All right, so you see it says sports store right there. We're going to shrink it way down. I don't know what the width is right here. I don't care. That looks like that's as narrow as I can make it. All right, but as we start doing this, we may want, if we want all of this to appear on the same line or in the same area or like it does out here, then we're going to want the word store to go under the word sports, and we want to be able to move stuff around. That's exactly what the author's talking about here. All right, and you hear these kind of sayings, and I don't mean to sound cliche, but start with the end in mind. What you want to do is you want to know exactly what you want something to look like even before you build it. All right. All right. Now, they talk about branding here. You may or may not remember this, but back when we were talking about how to even do Bootstrap, one of the first things you learn how to do is to put that nav bar on the top. And you may or may not remember it. One of the things that we did typically was we had your logo on the left, and then maybe way off on the right, we had your menu, your navigation. All right? That logo is your brand. And what the author says in this section right here, I'm not going to read it to you, but what the author says is you may have to accept as a web developer that whomever you are creating a website for isn't giving up their branding. In other words, no matter how narrow you make something, they may want their logo to be on the top and be at least of a certain size. And that's just something you're going to have to work with. All right? And that's pretty much what they talk about in here. So I'm just going to run through what the author's doing in here. Now notice, the first thing he's going to do is start making changes to the layout file. It would be totally permissible to have two different layout files. You could have another layout file that would be called _layout mobile or _m layout, M for mobile, or whatever, if you wanted to or needed to do that. All right, but I'm going to grab what he's got here. So this is right under the title, whoops, right under the title. Still inside of the head. So we're putting in here some inline CSS right there. Now, remember, yes, it's inline, but also remember, since it's in _layout, what that should mean, since it's in _layout, is that any page that uses the regular layout is going to be able to take advantage of this. Could this have been put into the other file? Yeah, but it actually wouldn't have made as much sense as putting it right here. So we're saying that any page that's going to inherit from _layout, all right, will have a nav bar that's pulled to the right. It'll float to the right. You may or may not remember this. Yeah, it's been a while. But when you say exclamation mark important like that, you're saying overwrite anything else anybody else put in there. All right? And we're adding some right margin, and we're adding some left margin. All right? Next, at the beginning of the body, all right, right under our nav bar inverse, we're going to put a few things in here. All right, so we're replacing what's in here, right there, with that. All right, now notice, hidden XS. That is literally saying hide it on an extra small device. All right. In fact, let me grab this again. Yep, I screwed it up. There we go. Continuing on. Yeah.
So is it the class that is letting it know that you want it to look like a mobile version?
In this case, what we're doing is we're starting by making some what are actually superficial changes to the layout file that's shared by all of them. Eventually, we're going to create our own files for just the mobile version. Oops, I don't know what I did there. All right. Div. Span, div. Not sure why I'm getting the squiggly there, but hopefully it'll work its way out as we work our way through this. All right. I did mention this to you earlier. I do want to say it one more time. That is, if you notice in here, I'm not changing that line that's in blue. But if you look at the line on your screen that's in blue, it says div class equal row panel. That's two different Bootstrap classes. The reason I'm mentioning this to you is the panel class was usable in Bootstrap version 3, which is what this is based off of. But if you were to go to Bootstrap 4, it wouldn't know how to handle. It did not bring panels over. It got rid of panels and something else that's used in here that's called wells. All right, they're both gone now. All right. So the author says that underneath this, Bootstrap defines a set of classes that can be used to show or hide elements. This is something you can manually do using media queries, but Bootstrap classes are integrated into the other styles. So you're going to have your choice. You're probably going to use a combination of your own CSS and Bootstrap classes when you are working on your project that we'll start on next week. I would suggest that when you're doing anything, that you have getbootstrap.com open and you say, before you try doing something on your own, look and see if there's a Bootstrap class that already does it for you. Because then all you have to do is add it and boom, you get the functionality for free. I'm going to leave it up to you. I didn't know whether to do this or not, but I'm saying it. It's on tape. It'll be there forever. All right. So I'm going to leave it up to you. You have your choice. You can either use version 3 like the author did in this book, or you can use version 4. The advantage of using version 4 is they have some cool new stuff that didn't exist in 3. The advantage of using 3 is, like I said, if you want to use wells and panels like they use in the sports store, you can use it in version 3. You can't in version 4. One thing about Bootstrap, when they've had new versions, not new releases, but new versions, usually they're not very compatible with the older ones. When they went from Bootstrap 2 to Bootstrap 3, there were major changes. Almost any site that was running on Bootstrap 2, when they tried to manually convert it over to 3, broke. And most of the time, it happened too when they went from 3 to 4. All right. You might say, well, why would they do that? I don't work for them, so I don't know. I think it's for instance, you may or may not be aware of this, but I've read all sorts of different numbers that go from anywhere from 10% to 50% of companies that are using Windows today are still using Windows 7. And you might say, well, big deal. Microsoft doesn't support it anymore. So it's a pretty doggone big deal. All right. And if something breaks, Microsoft has said, don't look at us. So a lot of companies have started to say, oh, well, we'll support it. All right. But Microsoft does that. They start making some bigger changes. Why? Because they want you, they want you to buy their newer product. All right. And I think it's the same kind of thing with Bootstrap, which is free anyway. All right. But they've got to make money on it some way.
Is it possible to have both in one thing?
To have what?
Both Bootstrap 3 and 4 and
I have never seen that. You could look it up. I don't know. All right. Now, this isn't your question. All right. But is it possible to use, well, maybe it is, Bootstrap 3 classes and Bootstrap 4 classes? I don't think so, because I think the system is going to, Google it. But I don't think it's possible. All right. It may be that you could do a certain page for 3 and another page for that. I don't know. I never tried doing anything like that. All right. Now, may sound very, very minor, but look on the screen here at this cautionary note on the top of 259. Responsive CSS features like Bootstrap provide, the ones that Bootstrap provide are based on the size of the browser window, not of the device screen. Not how big it can be, how big it is. All right. So it says mobile devices are usually displayed full screen. Again, more and more when you're talking mobile, you're talking little tablets, and you're talking phones. All right. It means that the window size and the screen size are the same, but again, as it says, you can't always rely on that being the case. Now, if I make this change, all right, made the change. If I save this and run it, am I going to be able to see it? I don't know. I didn't try making any of these changes before class. Nothing. So, but the author goes to great extremes here to say that when you start making changes to make something responsible, that even, there it is. So notice sports store, when we got down to a certain point, is 2 lines. All right? So if nothing else, I'd be able to tell my client, I'm trying, I'm working on it. You can see I'm starting to make changes, type of an idea. All right. As it says, this may seem like a small change, but it has a big impact on smaller screens. Again, not on my screen, because all I did was take a big screen and shrink it down. But if this was running on my phone, it would be a pretty big effect. All right? Okay. It says, especially when we combine those with the changes that are made in the views cart summary.cshtml file. So I'm going to just grab this whole thing. I'm hoping it's all in here, but I don't know. But I'm going to grab this whole bit of code that's listing 10.2 that is on page 260, copy it to the clipboard, and go and find my views cart summary.cshtml. So there's my views, there's my cart, there's my summary. Now you'll notice it's not very big right now. That's it. All right, and I'm just going to, as I've done several other times, I'm going to highlight all of it and just comment it out. All right, and then throw that down below and put the quote new stuff, unquote, in here. All right, so what do we have? Well, again, you see hidden and visible. See that? All right, you didn't see that before. This is taking the place of media queries, where when you're at a certain part, you would say display none. All right, that gets replaced with this hidden. All right. So the author says this is the same technique that we applied to the layout _layout.cshtml file. We have chosen to selectively show and hide content. In this case, we're hiding the standard Checkout Now button on small screens and replacing it with an icon button using one of the icons that's included with Bootstrap. Okay? The icons, it says, are applied through a span element, which means that we can't use the action link. So sometimes, again, sometimes what you have available to you in ASP.NET MVC and what you have available to you in other packages that play with ASP.NET MVC may not play real nicely together. All right? All right. I don't know. They didn't say to run it yet, but I'm going to try it anyway. So I'm going to do a save all and run it again. And then shrink it down again. All right. Can everybody see what changed when you look? Look at this stuff up here and look at this. This will go to 2 lines, but mainly look in here. See how it's shrunk down? It's now that those items, and the button has changed to a built-in button. Now you might say, well, you know what? I like that button better than the word checkout. Well, you could change it then. All right. One thing that I've learned over time is when you work for other people, what will happen is the more experience you get, the more you'll know what looks good and what doesn't look good. But you'll deal with people all the time that they want something because they think it'll look good, and you in your heart of hearts know it won't. After a while, it really doesn't pay for you to try to convince them that they're wrong. Either they're going to find it out themselves, or they'll be happy with what they have. All right? And the good news is if they find it out themselves, they'll probably be calling you back for more business. All right. This I'm not going to go over because I said it to you before. Mobile first or desktop first. You know, if you've already got a site and you don't have a mobile version, you've already done the desktop first. All right. But the author does say here that both approaches have their merit, but he likes the desktop first. And it's funny because he likes it. Most people like mobile first because they want to get the hard stuff out of the way and make it look nice. He likes the desktop first because you can typically get something up and working real fast. In other words, it's easier to prototype a website for a desktop or a laptop than it is to prototype it for a mobile device. All right, and that should make sense. All right. So, to complete the responsive adaptations, the author says here, we need a product list that will display on narrow screens. It says the biggest problem is caused by the horizontal space taken up by the category buttons. So we're going to move the buttons out of the way and again make some changes. So again, this will be in the layout file. And you'll notice down near the bottom, all right, down near the bottom, not really near the bottom, I guess, it's right after the stuff we just put in, we're going to add this. All right, so that was right, I believe, right down here. All right, now, make sure I didn't do this right, so please look. All right, I just added this. It is, what I just did was illegal. You may or may not know what I just did, but it's illegal. What I mean is, you can only have one render body statement in here. So this was the one that was there. It's now gone. So I replaced the render body that was there. All right. I got rid of it and we replaced it with this. And that's what he explains in here. I'm not going to read to you. So ideally now, when we run it again, it's going to look more like this. Look what's changed. Look on the screen and look what's changed. This is on a typical laptop or desktop. This is the mobile version. Now, we're going to have to, we're losing the home, chess, soccer, and water sports. We're going to end up putting them in this white area in here as we go on. But as of right now, it is looking better, but we can't choose by category yet. All right, but I want to see if mine looks the way that theirs looks. So again, I'm going to do a save all, and I'm going to run this. Whoa. Well, it must be in there twice, so. All right, so that's where the second one is, but you can see it looks better. So I've got the same thing in here twice, which means I better look in here and see what the heck is going on. All right, row panel, XS3, hidden S3. I want to see if all that stuff was in there.
Have the menu and the one right in the very yeah, you have to.
Yep, you're right, right here. This is in there twice. All right. Try it again. Now, I will expect for next week, the end of next week, that you're going to have this turned in hopefully through at least Chapter 10 that we're working on right now. All right, so let's look at that. And thank you, Abby, again. So we're going to have to, we've got gaps in here. There's all sorts of things we could do to make it look better. I mean, you could complain right now. You could say, you know what? If you only put one of these things on a page, you'd be able to see then your pagination. Or if you put two on a page. There's all sorts of ways that you could, quote, improve, unquote, this. All right? All right. Let's do this and we'll take a break. The author says, I don't want to leave mobile users without the ability to filter products, which means I need some way to present those categories to them. Again, home, chess, soccer, and water sports, or whatever the heck it was. To do this, notice what we've done. We've created a new view called menu horizontal.cshtml in the views nav folder. What does that mean? Well, under views, we've got a folder named nav. It's right here. To create a new view, I'm just going to right mouse click, add, view. All right. You can see by default it just calls it view, but they want us to call this, I think it's menu horizontal. All right. And I'm just going to click add. And what does it give me? It should give me menu horizontal.cshtml. And there it is. Nothing in it right now. All right. So the contents are shown here on page 264. I'm going to grab those, copy them to the clipboard, paste that in. All right, so that's everything. And the author mentions, this is a variation of our original menu.cshtml layout, but it has a container div and some bootstrap classes that are going to handle, as they mentioned, the horizontal layout of the buttons. But the basic functionality is the same. You know, again, you're all smart people. You all know that most of your users aren't going to be going like this. They're not going to be on a desktop or laptop where they're constantly doing this. You know, moving this in and out. Just, well, wonder what it looks like bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. They're not going to do that. Doesn't mean they'll never do it, but they at least probably won't be doing it on a very regular basis. All right? So it says the categories, set of category buttons is generated through the menu action of the nav controller, which now needs to be updated. So we need to go back to the navcontroller.cs file. All right? And right after, remember, this is the same name as the class. This right there, that is our constructor. So right under the constructor, we want to add this. All right, so I'm going to go back to the navcontroller.cs file. So under my controllers, I want to find the nav controller. All right, and then right under this, so right under this, all right, we want to add this. All right, so what does that mean? We already have a partial view called menu. We want to remove the one that's in there and replace it with this one. So what was in there? Well, I guess I can bring it back and show you. All right, we had a string category equal null. That was it. Now notice what we have in here. Now we have something that says bool horizontal layout equal false. We want to be able to switch back and forth. All right. We also need to add this then down near the bottom of that routine. Right near the bottom of the routine, right after the I enumerable. Okay, which is here. Get rid of the return statement and replace it with these two lines of code. All right. So what is it saying here? What it's saying here, what view name do you want to use? If horizontal is set, if the horizontal layout is set, use menu horizontal. If that's not set, use the regular menu. That's all. All right. So, I didn't think it was going to be, this part would be that long, but it is. We have defined a new parameter for the action method that specifies orientation, as it says, which we use to select the name of the view file to be passed to partial view. So are we going to pass that view file, or are we going to pass, are we going to pass that view file or that one? That's what they're saying. All right, to set the value of this parameter, we need to return to the underscore layout and make another change. So right under the summary cart div, we're going to add this. Again, I'm out near the bottom of page 265. Oh, I guess I wanted that after the ending div. I find, you may or may not agree with this, but what you're going to see is if you look at enough of my code, maybe not in this example, but I tend to put a lot of white space in here. I like it when things are separated and I can tell what goes with what. Not everybody agrees with that. It's not that big a thing. Again, it's just part of my own style, be it good or bad. So it says here the optional third argument to HTML action method is an object that lets me set values for the routing system. All right, I use this feature to signal which view should be selected. Okay. Is it going to work? I have no clue. But I'm going to try it. Half the battle when you do something like this is doing it and at least having it compile and not break. All right. So you can see what it looks like. All right. I don't know if that was supposed to happen, but it did. I don't like that's supposed to be up there and it's not anymore. I'm not sure why. What's that? Yeah, I'm sure it's a div thing. It's where I've got my divs. I'd be willing to bet that's what it is. All right. But the point is this. These options that you see, all right, well, now they're not even there. All right. So I've hosed something up on mine. All right. I'll have to go back and take a look at it. But you did see, or hopefully you saw, once they got small enough here, we now have this. See that? All right, so I'm going to go back after we take a break and I'm going to check my code. See if I made a mistake someplace, which, hey, quite possible. So it says you can see that moving the buttons to the top gave us more space that we can work with. All right? So let's take a break. The author says we have focused only on the iPhone, but don't forget there's other devices. Very true. All right? So when we come back from the break, we'll pick it up on the bottom of page 266. We only have about 10 more pages to go. Removing view duplication. It is 1:33. Let's please come back at 1:50. Hopefully that'll give me enough time to figure out what I screwed up.
Every time I click on the home page, it comes up with this.
Yeah, I got that too. Originally I had that. Notice it says the requested URL is nav list.
I don't know
All right.
how to fix that. I've been going through all my
All that I can tell you, and I don't know what, unfortunately, I don't know what chapter that was in.
Yeah.
But it's I believe in either 7, 8, or 9. There's something in there that you either did do that you shouldn't have done or didn't do that you should have done. When I did it, the one that I have, the actual, what I've been using as the key, so to speak, that's what mine does. But now mine works.
So just go look through them.
Yeah,
real
you're
quick?
gonna have to do that. That's the
All
best
right.
thing I can tell you. If I knew what I did differently, I'd tell you, so you wouldn't have to go through the same thing.
View. I think I made it as separate view. Wrong, I made it. I think it's there. Partial view and then first one is switch locations.
What file? You're in the layout file. All right.
So when I make my view, I'm supposed to do it on the map folder, right?
When you made the view, you were supposed to make. Are you talking about the menu horizontal, or
Yeah.
whatever the heck it was?
Yeah.
Mine is in under nav. There's a menu now, and you should add a menu horizontal.
Yeah, I have to.
All right. Well, I'm not the one to ask because mine isn't working right. So I'm literally going back
Okay.
in the book and just going page by page.
Okay.
Well, for those of you watching this, now you get to see exactly what I did to try to fix it.